As the 2010s close out and we have just 1 year left of the generation, it's fair game to start commenting on how this console cycle has gone overall. Because whilst gaming has exploded to lucrative heights that outmatch even Hollywood in pound-for-pound revenue, chances are you've got a handful of personal stories surrounding high-profile disappointments. Titles that felt unfinished, missed opportunities, or even outright cancellations. Yes, the gaming industry is bigger than ever, yes, the likes of the Game Awards are being seen by more people around the world, but this increased breakneck pace has resulted in many major studios crunching project turnarounds to cash in as fast as possible. That means more genuinely broken games put out for full price than ever before, a situation that mimics the industry crash of 1983, where afterwards public perception of gaming was thought of as a waste of time. After all, if all you're getting for your money is disappointment and half-baked time wasters, why bother? Going forward, it is clear that attitudes need to change in regards to turnaround, hype cycles, when games are first shown to the public, and how much studios then fall back on post-launch patches. Right now, though, we have a past decade filled with games that did a harsh disservice to their most creative staff, and those that laid down the cash to play on day one. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 14 most broken video games of the decade. Number 14, Assassin's Creed Unity. The face seen around the world. All it took to tank an already fairly unhyped Assassin's Creed was this abomination of a face glitch. But sadly, the torment for Ubisoft and its fans didn't stop there. No, clearly AC Unity was rushed to market to meet a late 2014 release window, as Ubi, touting a new slogan of "the next generation starts here," wanted to unveil what the next cycle of Assassin's Creed would look like. While environments remain some of the franchise's finest and the chemistry of romantic leads Arno and Elise is exemplary, actually playing this sequel was just horrific. If Arno wasn't getting snagged on outcrops of buildings, he was falling right through them. And that's before the state of the game on Xbox One was so bad, it required a full replacement of the entire game file through a gargantuan patch. Number 13, Fallout New Vegas. It comes to something when a game is staring you in the face with its glitches and lack of polish, even in the opening scenes. And yet, after being unceremoniously executed by Matthew Perry's Benny, thousands of players awoke to find Doc Mitchell's head swiveling on the spot. Naturally, this only went on to show that otherwise legendary developers Obsidian had struggled considerably with Bethesda's god-awful Gamebryo engine, and New Vegas itself barely held together from then on in. It would later come out that Bethesda were extremely unhelpful across development, and only gave the studio 18 months to turn around this spin-off from Fallout 3. Both things that contributed to a stilted title whose positives struggled to shine through. Thankfully, New Vegas was eventually patched and reworked enough to remain one of the best Fallouts of them all, but that opening period, whew. Number 12, Star Wars Battlefront 2. A game not broken through lack of polish, but a disastrous business mandate crowbarred into development that was then ripped out on day of launch. This, of course, refers to the state of microtransactions in Battlefront 2, which before release were barely talked about, yet still referred to a card system of power-ups, damage modifiers, and stat boosts. Want to buff your character? Pay some money and unlock more cards, or grind for a good 40 plus hours to get enough credits for just one skin at a time. It was just that quote-unquote simple. All this came after years of people putting up with microtransaction systems becoming the most hated thing in the modern gaming industry. EA being EA and applying the worst practices to Star Wars was just too much. The backlash was overwhelmingly strong, leading to the storefront being gutted from the game, which in turn meant that your only recourse was still grinding. DICE and EA would put out numerous responses to this tire fire of a problem, eventually overhauling progression and unlockables to make Battlefront 2 an incredibly fun Star Wars product. The fact it took such a mounted offensive to get them to do the right thing by the fans, though, remains a notable example of EA just being the dog worst. Number 11, SimCity, 2013. No, it wasn't microtransactions this time, but EA had the bright idea of tying SimCity's core gameplay to an always online connection. Why? Because according to the game's creative director, Ocean Quigley, EA wanted a platform for content that they could plug DLC and additional purchases into. Infuriatingly, this even applied when you were offline, and as the game's servers couldn't handle the load of incoming players, it resulted in a literal countdown clock on screen, denoting when you could access the thing that you just bought. Wait times were upwards of 20 minutes on a good day, and even if you got into the game, SimCity's AI was a shell of its advertised self, with scores of signature features also being streamlined for the worst or just being removed altogether. EA's response? To sell hot air balloon DLC, with Quigley comparing the project to a sinking ship and saying that the game's backend was collapsing in flaming server rooms. Number 10, No Man's Sky. Straight up, No Man's Sky is a heartily recommendable sci-fi gem, but man did it start out as the total opposite. The product of a tiny 13-person team being given the platform of a lifetime, i.e. the E3 spotlight and various placements amongst PS4 highlight reels, coupled with creative lead Sean Murray lying his ass off whenever it came to potential features, the result was nothing of the sort. Yes, No Man's Sky was a walking sim meets intergalactic survival title, but its creature designs clearly needed a lot of work. Space dogfights had you being blasted from off-screen, and planet generation fell back on the same structures over and over. No Man's Sky was definitely a product of hype and exaggeration gone wrong. But thankfully, it had a bunch of coding issues that were only rectified and overhauled going forward. Number 9, Aliens Colonial Marines. The game that felt as though it had killed the Alien IP in gaming forever. At least until Alien Isolation miraculously resurrected it a year later. Colonial Marines was just a laughingstock at launch. And not only was actor Michael Biehn phoning it in when reprising his role as Hicks, but glitches and animation bugs were everywhere. The reason? Well, it turned out in July 2018 that the coders had overlooked literally one digit in the game's files that caused the Xenomorph AI to freak out. PC modders tweaked this and had a substantially better time. But Colonial Marines remains a crushing disappointment, a sign of things to come when it came to Gearbox's performance across the last 10 years, and a franchise black mark that we're just better off moving on from. Number 8, Diablo 3. If there's one thing that gets in the way of so many titles from moment one, it's server overload. I'm not even done covering the amount of games that crumbled under their own weight, but it never helps when the title in question is a sequel, or something the developers and publishers should know will be a big deal. Enter Diablo 3, sequel to RPG gaming royalty, and something people had been looking forward to with wide-eyed glee ever since it was announced. Like every other example of overload at launch though, Diablo 3 could only throw up an error message as players couldn't get past the title screen. Thankfully, Diablo 3 turned it around in a major way through sheer hard work and management of ongoing traffic, but the memeization of Error 37 makes this stumble legendary for all the wrong reasons. Number 7, Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. I pity anyone still looking forward to a Sonic game in the new age, at least unless it's not developed by Sega and it's called Sonic Mania. To that end, Sonic Boom was god-awful from the second we laid eyes on it. Redesigning Sonic to be an Olympian-adjacent athlete and making Knuckles a bumbling fool did nothing to endear this soft reboot to fans. But then we played the game. Product of Sonic Boom going through hell across development, with many ideas being conceptualized and then thrown out at various stages of completion, the final product barely held together. Sonic's signature speed was nowhere to be found, the environment lacked detail, and best/worst of all, a glitch let you repeatedly jump out of the world altogether all the way to the final boss. Sonic Boom was so bad Sega actively apologized and then gave us Sonic Forces. Number 6, Battlefield 4. No, you can't go too long on a list like this without EA popping up again. As whilst Ubisoft learned from their mistakes and started to turn the second half of the generation around, EA were more like Emperor Palpatine, reveling in being as mad cacklingly evil as possible. With Battlefield 4, it was yet another product of EA rushing as many things to market as they could, with the otherwise brilliant DICE simply not having enough time to iron out the kinks. Eventually, it was abandoned, as the fiscal turnaround meant upcoming titles needed to be worked on instead. That initial period was filled with elongated character models, crashes when parts of multiplayer maps attempted synchronized destruction, and more matchmaking issues than you can shake a loot box at. Like Sega with Sonic Boom, EA issued an apology for the state of Battlefield, but that did very little to quell the rage of those who had dropped 60 notes on what was supposed to be a finished premium product. Number 5, Halo: The Master Chief Collection. The last of the server-based issues, but holy cow was 2014 a mess of generation-defining issues. It got so bad that even the mighty Halo, a flagship for an entire console and gaming identity for Microsoft, was mishandled, to the point where its iconic multiplayer was impossible to play. Dogged by failed connections and matchmaking queues that could descend into more than 10 minutes per match, the Master Chief Collection would also be abandoned as 343 Industries had to shift gears onto Halo 5 instead. They've since gone back and added Halo ODST and Halo Reach as peace offerings to fans, alongside fixing matchmaking and stability across the board, but to be honest, the Master Chief Collection was an insulting release that simply needed literal years of additional work. Number 4, Fallout 76. One of many formerly beloved developers whose reputations died this generation, Bethesda turned in the immaculate Skyrim, which itself was still notably glitchy, only to then get worse and worse. This culminated with the horrific Fallout 76, an attempt to take the already unreliable creation engine and apply it to an online MMO. Obviously, the results were terrible. Bethesda can barely get their offline titles to work without a hitch, never mind juggling 30 different players and their respective world events at the same time. 76 immediately fell apart, its character models T-posing, its world barely loading in. There was even a bug where if you stared directly at the ground, minimizing the amount of things the game had to load for you to see, everything would then run faster, letting you speed walk from A to B. Somewhere along the way, Bethesda went from an ambitious studio that we championed despite their mistakes to a company far out of their depth, abusing past fan devotion to rake in more cash. Number 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. A game pumped out to, you guessed it, squeeze some more money out of an existing fandom. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was finally the next numbered installment in the Pro Skater franchise since 2002, but it also only existed because Activision were about to lose the license. Set to expire in 2015, that meant developers Robomodo had to throw extra coal on the fires and forge a game from next to nothing, ultimately reusing a ton of assets and the game engine entirely from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, which itself was gut-punchingly disappointing. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was a wreck. Characters would fall through the floor, tricks wouldn't trigger, grinds would bounce you off walls, but most hilariously, often your skater would just launch right off the ground a good few feet into the sky for no reason. Indicative of just how many IPs and fandoms were abused in the name of profit these past 10 years, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, at least for now, exits gaming as a joke. Number 2, Mass Effect Andromeda. A rare case of a broken EA-published game not entirely being their fault, it turned out, thanks to a revealing Kotaku expose, that Andromeda's issues came almost entirely from a lack of planning and warring internal studios at BioWare. Still, we are talking about the version that they sold, and Mass Effect's grand return, after the already despised Mass Effect 3, ended up burying the IP for good. Seriously, EA have declared the franchise on ice after Andromeda's terrible reception, and to be honest, it was for good reason. Besides some fairly enjoyable combat, not a single necessary part of the Mass Effect formula held together. Facial animations were laughably unfinished, animation in general was robotic and distracting, and every emotional or story-based cutscene just fell flat on its face into the uncanny valley. BioWare would continue to patch Andromeda across its following launch months, but the end result was cancelling the game's Season Pass content and abandoning everything for Anthem. Good going, guys. Good going. And number 1, WWE 2K20. Oh god, top-tier publishers, just give developers more time. Clearly, as you can see from literally any screenshot or piece of footage taken from WWE 2K20, the game was not ready for public eyes. In beta at best, 2K19 saw longtime developers Ukes booted off the project, and NBA 2K20 devs' visual concepts were brought in to pick up the pieces. They were then asked to assemble said pieces into WWE 2K20, but the results were genuinely horrifying. If character models' faces weren't disappearing, the game's camera was actively leaving the arena. If the referee wasn't melding with a wrestler's leg, the ropes were glitching out and vibrating the entire ring. It might have made for a handful of funny montage videos, but when this is the one official WWE game, and there are millions of fans awaiting the next installment every single year, still pushing this out the door was just shameful. And that's my rundown of the most broken games since 2010. Let me know your own tire fires down in the comments below, and please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.